Hi there, I'm Angela Hurley, and I'm a classicist at the University of Southern California. I'm here today to answer your Greek mythology questions on Reddit. This is RUBICON on Reddit. Sent asks, why did Athena curse Arachne? Arachne is this sort of maybe like, not peasant girl, but she's nobody noble, she's nobody famous, but she has this amazing gift to weave. She, everybody comes around just to watch her weave. It's just this like, magical thing. And of course, she starts to boast that she's better than Athena. Athena comes down and she says, disguised, of course, you shouldn't do that. You don't want to incur the wrath of a god. And Arachne's like, it's fine. I'm amazing. It's fine. And then Athena reveals that who she really is, and Arachne is still boasting that she's better. And so they, of course, one of them, or each challenge one another, and they both weave, and they're both amazing at it. And so when Athena is weaving, she is weaving tales of mortals essentially, pushing the boundaries against the gods, right? These are different stories. But Arachne is weaving the obverse of that. The mortals are being taken advantage of by the gods. Athena is both enraged at how good Arachne's tapestry is, but also at what she's depicting. And so she tears it up, and then she starts beating Arachne. So she tries to hang herself. And then supposedly out of pity, Athena turns her, she's hanging by the tree, into a spider. And so Athena in that way sort of takes pity on her and lets her now weave in peace. And that's where we get the word for spider Arachne or arachnophobia from. So Indian Boy 1196 asks, if Achilles was so great, why did the war last so long? Achilles is actually not a part of the war the entire time. In the epic, the Iliad, it talks about the wrath of Achilles, but it's a snapshot of the entire war. It is in the 10th year of the war, and so presumably Achilles has been there, quite some time. But for the most part, it's pretty evenly matched. And in the Iliad, we see that he actually takes himself out of the war because he gets very upset and like the sense of betrayal from the sort of appointed Greek leader Agamemnon. So he voluntarily refuses to fight. And he only comes back to fighting when his cousin Patroclus gets killed by Hector. And in that case, when that happens, he's so enraged at the loss of Patroclus that he completely forgets about Agamemnon and just does not care, and is essentially set on revenge. We don't see him die in the Iliad. It ends when he kills Hector, and it's only from later traditions that you see his death. But he still dies before the Greeks take Troy. Well, so of course, as we know for the judgment of Paris, Athena and Hera are very much on the Greek side. And of course, Aphrodite is on the Trojan side. Apollo is on the Trojan side. Poseidon is on the Greek side. Signal-opening-1227 asks, is a Tartarus a person or a place? Technically, it's both. So Tartarus is, for all intents and purposes, a place. It is deep underground. We actually can kind of equate it to Christianity's hell sort of thing. It's a prison where all of those who transgress against the Olympian gods are sent to. But in Hesiod's Theogony, the way it's spoken about is also anthropomorphized. So all of the Greek gods are anthropomorphized. And so kind of similar to Gaia, who is the earth and also a woman, Tartarus is the same. So both. -EUTERPE- asks, did Sparta worship Athena? Yes. Every region in Greece has the same deities for the most part. It's whether or not, ones they pay special attention to or not. So Sparta definitely worshipped Athena. just like they would worship, Zeus, Apollo, Artemis, all of them. Mysterious Writing 7 asks, what is your personal favorite Greek myth? So I have to say Medea. She is a princess of Colchis, which is at the edge of the Black Sea. So for the Greeks, that's really far away. She's super foreign. And Jason, he's this young Greek hero. He's trying to get the Golden Fleece, which her father is guarding with this dragon. And, for most of the traditions, Medea in some way falls for him or wants to help him. And she helps him get the Golden Fleece. They have to travel to Corinth, where they are sort of staying under the king. And Jason decides, I know you helped me a lot, but I'm going to remarry. In retaliation, to really get back at Jason, she kills their sons and then she flees. She's not morally the best figure, but I think that that's also why I love her so much. Her story is extremely complex, and even in contemporary times, it's been reproduced and sort of, made to fit whatever narrative certain people want. She's even become a feminist statement for some. She's incredibly engaging and interesting, and so I would have to say her myth. All of them are my personal favorites. Shimosuku asks, why are worshippers of ancient Greek gods referred to as cults? Actually, the worshippers are referred to as cult worshippers. The ancient Greeks did have pretty much the same pantheon where you kind of do worship the same gods. They all are very different based on region or the function that those regions would emphasize. It's based on region and the function, and so the emphasis of that deity, and that's why it's a cult. It's not, referring to all the worshippers of all the gods. It's about that specific one at that temple. All of the Olympic deities would have their own cults, and those are the ones you often hear about. The whole point of a cult is you already know that these people believe, right? They already have that faith. And so with a cult, it's the action, it's the literal cultivation or the tending to that recipient of the cult. So if it's a god or a hero, whoever. And so that's the act of ritual, of sacrifice, of showing your worship sort of thing. XX Celestial lower dash blade. Why is Artemis so angry at men generally? So Artemis is the twin sister of Apollo. When their mother was pregnant with them, they were chased, of course, by a serpent from Hera. They're chased to this island. And one of the reasons why she gets that epithet of to help in childbirth is that she is supposedly born first. And then she helps her mother as a midwife to give birth to Apollo. And then, of course, Apollo is born and they defeat the snake. Artemis is a virgin goddess. She does not have male companions. She is, she protects, she watches over unmarried women, I should say girls. And she is associated with death and with punishment, but I would say it's pretty equal. The difference, though, is she only has female companions. And so whenever a man sort of transgresses that boundary, you can expect her to be pretty aggressive against it. An interesting one is with Actaeon, who, stumbles upon her bathing. He's a great hunter. He has his own hunting dogs, and she turns him into a stag, and then he is torn apart by his own hunting dogs. Although Artemis does not, single out men, she can be pretty aggressive in her punishment against them. Dan131 lower dash N asks, how did ancient Greek theaters work? Greek theaters were built into a hillside, right? And which obviously allowed them to have the space for the audience. But it also created these amazing acoustics so that in the orchestra, sort of the flat area in front of, the seated arrangements, you could hear the entire production. The actual, the theater area, so you have the orchestra, and then you have the backdrop, which is kind of like the, let's say the facade for modern terms. It's called the skene. And then you would have three entrances, one on each side and then one at the skene. This is actually a Senecan play, but it's the Madness of Hercules. And the actor who would be playing Hercules also likely played Hera. And if you know that story, Hera curses Hercules to drive him mad and make him kill his family. And so it does kind of put a nice spin on, even though these characters would be masked, you still could recognize their voice. You might even recognize their body language or something like that. And so it's interesting that you have, the same actor in certain roles. Sil3 NT Sir 3N asks, how are ancient Greek tragedies perceived at the time? On the one hand, we don't know. And on the other hand, we can kind of infer some things. The story of Euripides' Hippolytus, and the anecdote about that is that, so the story of Hippolytus is that there's this young man and he's the son of Theseus, and he just does not want anything to do with women. He does not want to have sex. He doesn't want to have a marriage. He just wants to go and hunt all day. And because of this, he loves Artemis, who is the goddess of the hunt, and he wants to hang with her in the forest. This makes Aphrodite, the goddess of love, specifically sexual love, very upset. And so she, in order to get back at him for not worshiping her, remember, cultivation, he's not showing her that proper time or honors, she forces his stepmother, Phaedra, to lust after him. And so this ends tragically, where she doesn't want to do it, but of course, the goddess is making her, so she kills herself. And in order to protect her children, falsely accuses Hippolytus to his father, her husband, Theseus, of rape. And so, of course, at the end, everybody ends up either dead or suffering. And in this story, actually, there is a deus ex machina, where Artemis comes down and reveals everything and essentially tells Theseus, you were wrong the whole time. So it kind of just depends. It's very much like how movies are perceived today. Some critics love it, some critics hate it, some people love it, some people hate it. It's just based on, how that audience subjectively perceives it. Okay, so Bitter Allison writes, how the apple of discord myth goes. To the beginning, there is a goddess called Thetis. She is going to marry a great hero called Helios. And at their wedding, because remember, she is a goddess and he is a great hero, all the gods are invited. But because it's a wedding and you want, it's supposed to be a joyous occasion, you don't want to invite Eris, the goddess of discord, and who they leave off the guest list. And true to her nature, she's not happy. And to get back at them for this slight, she throws down this golden apple and she writes on it, to the most beautiful. Athena, Hera, Aphrodite all want to claim it. And this leads to the judgment of Paris. And Paris is a prince of Troy, but because there's an oracle that he essentially will be the downfall of Troy, he's sort of hidden away as a shepherd. And so as he is a shepherd tending his flock, these three goddesses appear to him and say, which of us are the most beautiful? They each offer something that they could grant to him. But Aphrodite offers him the most beautiful woman in the world as his wife. And so as a young man, he's like, Aphrodite, you are the most beautiful. Which, unfortunately for the Trojans, is what sets off the Trojan War myth. Paris either steals away with Helen willingly or abducts Helen against her will, but he gets Helen in the end from Menelaus in Sparta, and then they go to Troy, and this, of course, leads to the Trojan War. Practical plan 4854 asks, I don't think an arrow to the heel will kill you. Did infection kill Achilles? Achilles is killed by Paris and Apollo. Now, although Achilles is the greatest warrior of the Trojan War, he's still no match for a god, right? Thetis, his Achilles' mother, held him by his heel in the river Styx to make him immortal, but except for that heel, is actually a later tradition. He's not entirely invulnerable, right? The earlier traditions essentially say that it's that Paris shoots him, right? We don't know where, it doesn't specify. But to this question, Apollo is associated with plague and with sickness and things like that. So there could be an allusion to either a poisoned arrow or even, an infection, something like that. This story is not in the Iliad. There's a feud that begins between Achilles and Agamemnon. That's what starts off his wrath, right? And then it ends the Iliad with the death of Hector and the bargaining for his body by Priam, his father, to Achilles. That's the Iliad. So you don't get the end of the Trojan War, and you don't get Achilles' death in the Iliad. So PTSLX asks, where do we get Greek myths from? Greece, as we know it, was not this unified Greece in ancient times. They were all city-states. Some of them were more advanced than others. You had pre-literate societies in Greece, to literate societies, and even when myths were written down, they were still changed or adapted. But there's a lot of influence from the neighboring areas. So the Egyptians had a lot of influence, the Assyrians, other societies in the Near East. Before, obviously, writing, you had these oral traditions. And so with the epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, those were transmitted orally before they were written down. And this is like centuries before. And it's the same with myths. So there's a lot of adaptability with the myths. And so often you're not going to find this very specific tradition that is unchanged and it is entirely Greek. There's, for lack of a better analogy, a melting pot that's going on with these stories, and it changes. It's based on the neighboring regions and societies, but also who's conveying them at the time and how. So lower dash that random kid lower dash asks, is there really any difference between the Roman and the Greek gods? For a classicist, yes. Mars is actually a perfect example because Mars is the god of war, and he's supposed to be the counterpart to Ares, who is the god of war for the Greeks, the male god of war. However, Ares is typically considered a coward, and he's the god of chaotic war. It's not like Athena, who's the goddess of strategic warfare. Whereas Mars is not like that. He is not a coward. He is sort of the exemplum for a Roman military man. He's strong. He knows what he's doing. He's confident. He would be like the second in command under Jupiter, the king of the gods and men, on the Roman side. And so you can see in that like sort of difference in personality how, yeah, they're both the male gods of war, but they are very different from one another. So I'm Franny. Asks, how long were the classic Greek festivals and how frequent were they in a polis like Athens? They were fairly frequent, but it also depends on the festival. So some were every year, and then some could be, at intervals of like every few years, every 4 years, something like that. Just kind of depends on what it was or what they were for. Schneedley asks, was the original Olympics in ancient Greece as widespread and international as they are today? The short answer is no. The original Olympics, they're named after Olympia, not just for Mount Olympus, but it was also it was a place in Greece, and it was in honor of Zeus. And so the Olympics were just one of a few sort of regional games, like festivals. But it was very much a Greek affair. And when I say Greek, I don't mean like this unified Greece. I mean like Hellenism. And that's sort of like we all have the same gods, we all have the same culture, that kind of thing. So Sunfire asks, was Cassandra getting cursed by Apollo her own fault? I'm going to tell you the story and then you can decide for yourself. Cassandra is a princess of Troy. Apollo comes to her and says, I will give you my prophetic ability if you sleep with me. At first she says, yes, that's fine. I will do that. And so he gives her his prophetic ability. But then she says, never mind, I don't want to have sex with you. And so she sort of goes back on her word. And he, in retaliation, curses her. He doesn't take his prophetic ability back, but he says, okay, fine, then no one will believe you. So you can prophesy all you want, but they just will never believe you. Famously, she is the one during the Trojan War who says, don't let that horse in. It's filled with Greek soldiers. It will spell doom for Troy. And none of them believe her. And this is consistent with her story where she knows what's going to happen. She can tell them and she could save them, but they don't believe her. Lex Mons asks, why wasn't Ares a patron deity of Sparta? Ares, although he is the god of war, is the god of chaotic warfare. And so he's not probably the best god to worship when you want to show yourself to be these impressive soldiers that, stand in this impressive military array that can defeat any army because they are this professional army. A god like Apollo, he's a much better deity to sort of guide you in this way. One, he is also known for his military prowess. For somebody like Sparta, this is kind of ideal because their whole thing is, how do we make these boys into men to be these great soldiers? You have a god like Apollo who sort of checks a lot of boxes for them. So he's a lot more of an appropriate god. Sarah DAKL asks, was Apollo the sun god or Helios? The short answer is both. In earlier traditions, you have Helios, who is both the sun and the god of the sun. Gradually, through time and regionally, Apollo starts to absorb some of his attributes. He becomes the god of the sun and the sun god, right? And we see a similar thing happening with both Helios' sister and Apollo's twin sister. So Helios, his sister is Selene, and she is the goddess of the moon. So the moon, but also the goddess of the moon. Apollo's sister, his twin sister Artemis, just like Apollo with Helios, starts to take on as the goddess of the moon. And so you just see that happening throughout. Grim _Londor is the king Minos, the judge of Hades, not the same Minos of the Minotaur? Yes, they are the same. Minos often gets a little bit vilified for his role with the Minotaur and all of that. He actually is seen as a good and a just ruler, and he's one of the sons of Zeus. Him and his brother Rhadamanthus, who is also a son of Zeus, and another son of Zeus, Icarus, they become the three judges in the underworld. So they are the same. And although, in the specific myth of the Minotaur, he might seem kind of tyrannical, he is considered fair. Legitimate-sugar 6487 asks, how did the ancient Greeks really view Hades? This is a bit complicated because Hades is both the god, but also the underworld, essentially. So like you could say like to send them to Hades and you mean the underworld, because you're also in a way sending them to Hades. He's the god of the underworld. And just like something like death, which he's representative of, you have this sort of complicated view where you pay extreme reverence to him, but also you don't really want to be near him, right? So you want to honor him as much as you can, but also at a distance a little bit. So it is a complicated view. It's not something like in Christianity where you have like the devil, for instance. There's no maliciousness with it. It's just that, it's synonymous with death. And how close do you always want to be around that? But it's also a natural part of life, and you need to pay your respects. Fragile Photon asks, what is your perception of Icarus? What motive do you think he had to fly high, knowing he will fall? Of course, Icarus doesn't know he's going to fall. He is warned several times, but that is sort of the lesson from his myth, is that not to get carried away. And so the Greeks really value moderation. They have a term called sophrosune. And essentially, it's you don't want to do anything too much or too little. And so anything in excess is going to be bad or lead to your downfall. And so Icarus is, of course, the perfect example of this, where he's flying, he has these makeshift wings, and he gets excited because, of course, as a human, being able to fly is an amazing, exhilarating experience. But although he's had numerous warnings, he gets carried away. He's not showing moderation. And of course, the wax is melted by the sun and he falls to his death. Banana Salty 8391 asks, what's your opinion on Hephaestus? In Greek society, they have this sort of view that may be a little bit foreign to a modern audience, where your outside is representative of your inside. And so if you were this noble, beautiful specimen of a person, then you must also be a noble, beautiful specimen of a person on the inside. And of course, this kind of goes against a lot of what modern people want to think about. But with Hephaestus, he is an Olympian deity, but he's also lame and disfigured. And yet he is an extremely important god. He is the god of fire. He is an amazing blacksmith. There's a fun little anecdote about he has these tripods that can move on his own, on their own. So he's very important, but he's also important because in some traditions, he is the offspring of Hera by herself. And so it says a lot to Greek society and sort of their psychologies in this, where you have Hera, of a woman who has this like autonomy over her own body, where she can produce her own son, but he's disfigured. And so I think Hephaestus is a very complicated character, but with all things in Greek, it shows the complexity. It shows that there's not this like one size fits all way of looking. And it shows through their psychology that nothing is perfect, and yet it could be very important. So I think that he shows that complexity. Double Dash Willingness 26 asks, why did Dionysus become an Olympian and not Heracles? The very short answer is that actually Heracles does become an Olympian deity after his death. But during the longer answer is that Dionysus is the son of Semele, a human, and Zeus. And basically, Hera gets tricks Semele into asking for like one thing from Zeus, and he can't say no. And what she asks is to see him in his god form. And of course, as a mortal, that can't happen. So she immediately bursts in flames. And right as she does so, she's pregnant with Dionysus, and Zeus snatches Dionysus from her before Dionysus can be killed, and he sews him into his thigh so that he can come to maturity and be born. So in a way, he's born of Semele, but also of Zeus, right? Hercules, or Heracles, even though he is the greatest of all Zeus's mortal children, as a mortal. However, when he dies, he is deified and becomes an Olympian. So it just takes him a little longer, I guess. So Late Underdash Bridges 1668. Give me an example of Zeus actually being a good guy for once. So I think Zeus gets a bad rap for, especially in modern times, for all of his affairs, whether the women are willing or not. So in Greek society, he is extremely important. He is seen as the god of all, the king of gods and of men, the father of both. There's a myth about Zeus, sort of as the protector of travelers, right? He's traveling with Hermes, and although the mortals don't know who it really is, they're treated kindly by this poor family. And then when it's revealed who they really are, they bestow all these gifts on those mortals, right? But the story really stems from that anxiety of you don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know whose home you're entering in, or who you're letting into your home. And Zeus is that overarching protector of people, right? But he's that just protector. And so he gets a bad rap for certain things, especially in a modern age when we're looking at it. But he really is seen as, someone who's a god who's supposed to be fair, just, who protects those who deserve the protection. Thank you for asking fun and interesting questions. If you would like to watch more, click on the description below. Thanks for watching.